Happening today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to visit President Trump for diplomatic talks at the White House, and Iran is sure to be at the top of that agenda.
And later, the two will attend the memorial service in D.C. for late Senator Lindsey Graham, who was a staunch supporter of Israel. Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst joins us live from Tel Aviv with the latest, Trey.
Yeah, hey guys, good morning. An important meeting will take place later this morning at the White House between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. The pair are expected to discuss the war in Iran and the next steps forward in this conflict. We know the New York Post reports that Netanyahu will share intelligence with the president about Pickaxe Mountain, next to the Natanz nuclear facility. Israel's leader is in town for the memorial ceremony for the late Senator Lindsey Graham.
I am also setting out for an additional purpose, to pay my last respects to our friend, a true friend of mine and of the State of Israel, Lindsey Graham, one of the greatest friends of the State of Israel of all time.
On the issue of Iran, President Trump spoke from Air Force One on Monday, indicating the Iranians requested to meet following the 13-day U.S. bombing campaign. Now, the president appeared optimistic about the possibility of a deal, as reports indicate Oman presented a proposal to Iran that would open the Strait of Hormuz. From July 24th to the 26th, 29 vessels passed through this critical waterway, according to international shipping data. President Trump indicated you can't bribe Iran to keep the strait open.
No, you can't bribe them. You got to beat them, and we're beating the hell out of them. But we'll see how it turns out. Right now, they have very friendly negotiations going on.
Today, the Israelis intercepted a drone along the border with Jordan, likely launched by an Iran-backed Iraqi Shia militia. Guys?
Trey Yingst live for us in Tel Aviv. Trey, thank you. Let's bring in the director of the American Military Project at Claremont Institute, Center Will Tebow. Will, the president has previously downplayed reports of activity at Pickaxe Mountain, but in light of the reported new intel to be provided by Benjamin Netanyahu, which one would expect would show potential activity there at the mountain, do you expect a strike on Pickaxe Mountain to be imminent?
Todd, I don't know that I would say it's imminent, but I think Iran has a degree of agency in how this goes. You know, President Trump was right at his rally in Michigan last night to say that we have compelled them through force back to the negotiating table. And there's an opportunity, I think, if Iran wants to take it, for them to pursue a path to peace. But this time they have to actually open the Strait of Hormuz, and they have to actually display a willingness to start the negotiating path to give up their nuclear program. I think Pickaxe Mountain, perhaps some other targets, will be quick to become eligible if this Iranian deception continues even more. But President Trump is right. There has to be a credible military deterrent if we're to believe that diplomacy has any chance of being successful. And this is part of what that means. It means assessing relevant targets, but also, critically, Iran having the belief that the United States will use our overwhelming military force to bring them to heel if they don't behave.
As for the diplomacy you mentioned, the president remarking, quote, "We are in very deep talks with Iran. If they don't work out, we'll go back to very strong military action." When asked how long he's willing to give diplomacy, the president said not much time. Either it goes fast or not at all. But that said, it doesn't seem like it's going to go fast, because nothing throughout this entire ordeal has gone fast, especially in light of the fact that, I mean, realistically, Iran wants to delay this all the way up to, if not beyond, the midterms to really increase the political pressure on the president here at home. So do you think that these negotiations will work out this time, Will?
Again, I don't know for sure, but I actually think that President Trump has reset the deck with respect to negotiating with Iran. We have not had a credible military deterrent with Iran for 30, 40 years, until President Trump reestablished it in June of 2025. We've continued to remind them, as they're learning very painfully, that such a military threat exists to their way of life. They will try and delay this, but I think they also know that once the midterms happen, the gloves will be off. There won't be quite the domestic political considerations weighing on President Trump. It's clear that there's not a coalition in America for a massive escalation of the war in Iran. And so I think Iran understands that if they continue this intransigence, if they continue misbehavior, then they're only going to be met with a President Trump come November who is emboldened to really make this painful and to not just allow the regime the space to strike a deal, but to end the regime once and for all.
Before we let you go, let's switch to Ukraine. President Trump reportedly warming up to Ukrainian President Zelensky. Quote, in recent weeks, the president has expressed fresh optimism about Ukraine and its leader. Trump has been impressed with Zelensky's resilience as he takes the fight deep into Russian territory. Look, we know Trump likes winners. He has said as much. I like winners. Does this signal more U.S. help is on the way to Ukraine? And if so, Will, what does that help look like?
Todd, I don't know that it represents an increase in the kinds of help we are giving Ukraine. But I think what President Trump is realizing, what I think many Americans are realizing, is that we can let this war play out, and Ukraine is doing a fairly heroic job of fighting Russia to a draw. Ukraine, a much smaller country, is inhibiting any Russian maneuver and offensive optionality on the battlefield, even without more aggressive U.S. assistance. And so I don't think President Trump necessarily has to decide to radically change the dynamic of what the United States is giving Ukraine. We're giving them pretty sophisticated intelligence. Our military-industrial base is giving them sophisticated software and targeting technology that allows them to stay in the fight. And so President Trump, I think, where he came into the administration looking for the first exit ramp for this war, is going to see that, hey, perhaps Ukraine is able to continue to degrade Russian combat power and really bring one of our global adversaries into this true multi-year, coming up on a decade-long quagmire. And that's advantageous for American standpoint around the world.
Will Tebow, thank you for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.